In a world just constantly buzzing with information, it's really easy to feel like you're just skimming the surface.
Hmm.
Or maybe even drowning in the daily news cycle.
Absolutely. Information overload is real.
But what if you could, cut straight to the core, understand the deeper currents, and get a truly informed view on the biggest global shifts?
That's the goal.
Well, today we're taking a deep dive into something really important: the evolving landscape of worldwide threats and global defense, specifically as we look at 2025.
Yeah, it's crucial stuff.
Our mission for this deep dive is basically to help you navigate this complex global security environment. We're talking the critical trends, maybe some surprising facts,
Uh-huh.
and those key insights that will make you genuinely well-informed. Let you connect the dots in a way most headlines just, can't.
Exactly. We really aim to clarify the complexity. And we're drawing directly from official assessments, expert analysis. We've pulled from some truly authoritative sources here. We've got the Defense Intelligence Agency's 2025 Worldwide Threat Assessment, a big forecast international report on global defense spending from June 2025.
Right.
A really critical piece from Celestica on defense supply chain resilience, that's from May 2025, and a Congressional Research Service report from last August on great power competition.
Wow, that's quite a stack.
Yeah, and they're not just dry reports, they're packed with insights, maybe even some revelation.
That's a powerful set of sources.
Uh,
And you're right, it's not about memorizing every single detail, is it?
Yeah.
It's about pulling out the crucial takeaways, the things that give you a clearer picture.
Precisely.
Okay, so let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Kicking things off with the big picture. The Defense Intelligence Agency's latest assessment really seems to set the stage. They describe the national security threat environment as, quote, increasingly complex and changing rapidly, driven a lot by advanced technology.
It's a fundamental transformation, really. It's not just tweaking things. Technologies like AI, biotech, quantum sciences, microelectronics, space, cyber, unmanned systems, drones, and they aren't just making conflict more efficient. They're entirely reshaping how warfare happens.
It was reshaping it entirely.
Yeah. And what's also striking is how adversaries are deepening their cooperation, finding ways to work together to circumvent U.S. power.
Okay.
And at the same time, you have transnational groups actively exploiting these evolving conditions. It creates this really dynamic, interconnected threat environment that, frankly, impacts everyone.
And it's not just abstract conflicts playing out somewhere else, right? What's really interesting here is how some of these threats are showing up as very direct challenges to the U.S. homeland.
That's right.
Let's maybe start with the missile threat.
Yeah, this is a significant concern. Adversaries like China, Russia, North Korea, they're rapidly advancing their missile capabilities.
How so?
Well, they're developing incredibly fast hypersonic glide vehicles, for instance. These are specifically designed to, complicate and potentially overwhelm U.S. defenses.
Make them harder to stop.
Exactly. And a stark example is North Korea. They've now demonstrated an intercontinental ballistic missile, an ICBM, that's capable of reaching the continental United States.
Wow.
That shifts the strategic calculus significantly.
And then there's the evolving nature of terrorism. The threat, as the DIA describes it, is dynamic and diffuse. What does that actually mean for the U.S.?
Well, it means groups are decentralizing how they plan attacks. So instead of these large, centrally organized plots,
Right.
we're seeing more decentralized efforts. For instance, ISIS is probably going to attempt high-profile attacks in the West, maybe similar to past incidents in Europe, but often through less direct means.
Okay.
Their affiliates, say in Afghanistan, and al-Qaeda's affiliate in Yemen, probably pose the greatest direct threat to the U.S. homeland right now.
And we've seen examples recently.
Unfortunately, yes. Tragic
Yeah.
examples like the ISIS-inspired lone actor attack in New Orleans on January 1st, 2025, that killed 14 people. And just last spring, you had 8 individuals arrested in the U.S. with potential ISIS ties after they entered via the southern border. It just underscores how diverse and persistent this threat remains.
That's a very stark reminder of how close these issues can be. And on that front, unmanned systems, or UXS drones, basically, they're posing an increasingly urgent threat. Why are they becoming such a problem?
The main challenge with USS is just how accessible they are. They're low cost, widely available, easy to operate.
It's not just for states anymore.
Exactly. It means they're no longer confined to state actors. A really broad range of hostile groups can get them, weaponize them, or just use them for surveillance against critical infrastructure or military sites.
And the tech is getting better, too.
Oh, definitely. When you get advanced UXS like drone swarms converging with other cutting-edge tech like AI, big data, 5G, well, that poses a serious headache for traditional defenses. It creates a much, much more complicated threat picture. And beyond those sort of direct homeland threats, we also see transnational challenges that indirectly but significantly impact the U.S. homeland.
Like what?
Take illegal migration, for example. We've actually seen a pretty remarkable decline in flows toward the U.S. southern border lately.
Really? How much?
About 80% down since the start of this year, averaging around 400 encounters per day. And that follows a 14% decline in 2024 from the nearly 2.5 million encounters in 2023.
What's driving that drop?
It seems to be largely attributed to deteriorating socioeconomic conditions across Central and South America. That, coupled with constrained Latin American security forces. It's a complex human tragedy, of course, but it directly affects border security.
And despite that decrease in migration numbers, the shadow of, drug trafficking and the cartels,
Yeah,
that still looms large, doesn't it?
absolutely. Major cartels, you know the names, Gulf, Jalisco, New Generation, Northeast, Sinaloa, Juarez, they remain the primary suppliers for the U.S. drug market.
And fentanyl.
Still a huge problem. While seizures did decrease 30% in the first half of fiscal year 2025, 19% the year before.
Okay, some progress maybe?
Possibly due to increased arrests or cartel supply adjustments, but the devastating reality is that over 86,000 Americans were still killed by fentanyl in 2024.
That's staggering.
It is. And meanwhile, cocaine and methamphetamine trafficking are likely to stay elevated just because they're so profitable for these criminal organizations.
So we've outlined some very tangible, very immediate threats. Now, if we sort of pull back, look at the bigger geopolitical picture, it seems clear the post-Cold War era, with its focus on counterterrorism, has given way to something much larger. What people are now calling great power competition. Basically an intensified global competition, primarily between the U.S. and China and Russia.
Right. And what's fascinating here, I think, is how these adversaries are deepening their cooperation bilaterally. They're even managing to compartmentalize internal frictions to present this remarkably united front against Western influence.
So they're coordinating more.
Definitely. Beijing, Moscow, Tehran, Pyongyang, they're strengthening their ties. And this trend has been dramatically accelerated by Russia's war in Ukraine.
How so?
Well, look at North Korea. They've shipped millions of artillery rounds and dozens of ballistic missiles to Russia. They've even deployed reportedly over 12,000 troops to fight for Russia in Ukraine.
Thousands of troops.
Yeah. And Iran, in turn, continues to provide Russia with armed drones, UAVs.
And what does Russia give back?
That's the other side of the coin. Russia is expanding its sharing of space, nuclear and missile-applicable technology, expertise, materials to China, Iran, and North Korea.
Which means?
Which means enabling significant advancements in their WMD programs, probably within the next 3 to 5 years. This is a potential game changer for global stability. It's a really concerning feedback loop.
That is a truly concerning dynamic.
Yeah.
Let's dig deeper into China's strategic objectives then, since they're such a central player in this great power competition.
Okay. China's ambitions are pretty clear. They want to be the preeminent power in East Asia, they want to unify Taiwan, and ultimately challenge U.S. global leadership.
And they're backing that up with military modernization.
Massively. They are rapidly modernizing their military across all domains, land, sea, air, space, cyber, with aggressive targets set for 2027 and 2035.
What about spending? We hear numbers.
Well, their announced military budget for 2025 is nominally higher, around $247 billion. But their actual defense spending in 2024 was estimated to be significantly greater, probably between $304 and $377 billion.
Why the difference?
Because the official numbers often omit things like R&D funding and industrial subsidies. So the true scale of their investment is often much larger than what's publicly stated.
And how is that huge investment showing up, particularly around Taiwan and the South China Sea?
We're definitely seeing increased military pressure on Taiwan. They're conducting these large-scale drills now involving aircraft carrier battle groups, demonstrating improving blockade capabilities. Yeah. And their Navy recently did its first dual aircraft carrier exercise in the South China Sea. That's a big step up.
And conflicts with neighbors.
We've seen increasingly aggressive actions against the Philippines in disputed areas using water cannons, lasers, dangerous maneuvering near ships. These incidents, like at Second Thomas Shoal or Scarborough Reef, carry a real risk of escalation.
Okay. And internally, changes in their military structure.
Yes,
Yeah.
Beijing is also directly realigning key forces, aerospace, cyberspace, information support, joint logistics, putting them right under the Central Military Commission. This emphasizes space, cyber, and electronic warfare as key asymmetric weapons.
Asymmetric, meaning ways to counter a stronger conventional force.
Exactly, using technology to level the playing field or gain an edge against a perhaps more conventionally powerful adversary.
That's a subtle but really significant strategic shift. What about their nuclear capabilities and their global reach?
Well, their nuclear warhead stockpile has already gone past 600. The estimate is it'll reach over 1,000 by 2030, and they're keeping them at higher readiness levels.
So, more weapons ready faster.
Right. Their approach is framed as deterrence and counterstrike, but the goal is having an overwhelming damage capability. And beyond their immediate region, China is actively expanding its global military operations,
Wow.
establishing overseas logistics hubs, basing infrastructure. For instance, in 2024, they had their largest ever military exercise in Africa, in Tanzania, deploying over 1,000 troops by sea and air.
Wow.
And this year, they inaugurated a joint logistics and training center at Ream Naval Base in Cambodia. Chinese warships have been continuously stationed there.
So, permanent presence.
Looks like it. And they're reportedly considering establishing similar military facilities in a whole list of countries across Asia, Africa, even Latin America. It shows a clear intent to project power much more globally.
Okay, so China's rapidly expanding its capabilities and its global footprint. What about Russia? Especially given the ongoing war in Ukraine.
Yeah, Russia's situation is complex. President Putin seems to view the war in Ukraine as truly existential. He seems committed to victory at least through 2025 and is demanding Ukrainian neutrality.
But the war has taken a toll.
A massive toll on their conventional military capabilities. We're talking over 700,000 personnel casualties, thousands upon thousands of ground combat vehicles, tanks, aircraft, naval vessels lost.
Huge numbers.
They are. Their conventional forces are likely degraded for at least the next 3 years, maybe longer. Despite this, their defense budget for 2025 is enormous, $150 billion. That's 40% of their entire federal budget.
Even with labor shortages and sanctions.
Even with those pressures, yes. And the Russian Navy is increasingly serving as their primary tool for global power projection.
Yeah, so
Deployments to places like Latin America, including that nuclear-powered submarine last year, first time since the Soviet Union fell. They also held a global naval exercise, Okean 2024.
and space, counter space.
Russia is intensely focused on counter-space systems. They seem to believe it can deter Western reliance on space assets. They even possess a satellite capable of carrying a nuclear device.
Nuclear device in orbit.
The U.S. recently made a more precise assessment of it, yes. And Russia notably vetoed that UN resolution reaffirming the 1967 Outer Space Treaty ban on nuclear weapons in space.
That's certainly worrying. What about their broader WMD capabilities and efforts to destabilize Europe?
Well, Russia is definitely expanding its nuclear forces. About 1,550 deployed strategic warheads, maybe up to 2,000 non-strategic ones. Plus, they're expanding their nuclear posture into Belarus.
And the rhetoric.
Lots of nuclear rhetoric, yes. Though actual use seems unlikely unless they face what they see as an existential threat. They're also expanding chemical and biological warfare programs and have reportedly used riot control agents in Ukraine.
And the destabilization in Europe.
Beyond the battlefield, yes. Since early 2024, we've seen pro-Russian saboteurs linked to arson, sabotage, even assassination plots across Europe. It seems aimed directly at undermining Western cohesion.
And globally. Still seeking influence.
Definitely. Russia is actively pursuing basing and port call agreements worldwide, expanding ties with countries in the global south, seeking bases in key regions like the Med, the Red Sea, the Indian Ocean, and expanding its presence in Africa, especially the Sahel, as a low-cost way to compete with the West.
It paints a picture of a Russia that, yeah, despite setbacks in Ukraine, remains a really significant and complex global actor.
Yeah.
Now, let's turn to Iran and its network of proxy forces.
Right. Iran has shifted its strategy somewhat, more towards direct retaliation against Israel. We saw that with the April 2024 attack, 300 missiles and UAVs, and another in October 2024 with 200 missiles.
Why the shift?
It seems to follow Israeli strikes targeting leaders within its axis of resistance network.
And support for proxies continues.
Oh, yes, Iran will continue to rearm Hezbollah and provide lethal aid to various proxy forces across the Middle East. Iraqi Shia militias, Syrian militants, the Houthis in Yemen.
Though Hezbollah took some hits.
Significant hits, yes. Israeli strikes have reportedly degraded their capabilities substantially, maybe destroying half their military infrastructure and killing their leader, Hassan Nasrallah.
What about Iran's nuclear program?
Okay, so Iran isn't currently producing nuclear weapons, that's the assessment. But their activities have reduced their potential breakout time, the time needed to produce fissile material for one weapon, to less than 1 week.
Less than a week.
It's very short. And Iranian officials have even threatened to revisit their nuclear doctrine if their facilities are attacked. It just adds another layer of instability to the region.
And how does North Korea fit into this complex web of adversaries? Where do they stand?
North Korea is arguably in its strongest strategic position in decades. That's quite a statement.
Strongest in decades? Why?
They seem confident in their regime's security, and they're increasingly able to threaten U.S. forces, our allies in Northeast Asia, and, as we mentioned, the U.S. homeland directly.
Is it their missile force?
Their nuclear-armed missile force is core to this, yes. And we've seen them proliferating ballistic missile systems, notably selling them to Russia, which further shows how they're integrated into this adversarial network.
And their nuclear goals.
Kim Jong-un's 2021 defense plan emphasized tactical nuclear weapons and making nuclear weapons smaller and lighter. Plus, North Korea has restored its nuclear test site, raising concerns about a potential 7th nuclear test.
What about space and cyber?
Well, they've only had one successful satellite launch back in late 2023, but they've made threats to destroy U.S. spy satellites. And significantly, Russia has apparently offered assistance to North Korea's space program.
More cooperation.
Exactly, deepening their technological ties.
Okay, finally, before we move on, let's just touch on Latin America. How are U.S. competitors using the region?
Well, unfortunately, poor socioeconomic conditions across much of Latin America are creating opportunities for U.S. competitors. Cuba, for example, seems increasingly receptive to cooperation with China, Russia, and Iran, partly due to its own deteriorating domestic situation. China's engagement often aims to solidify trade, especially for critical minerals, and also to shrink Taiwan's diplomatic space.
Like the port in Peru.
That new deepwater port in Peru is a prime example, potentially giving China significant strategic access. And Russia was actively courting Latin American countries in 2024, including that notable nuclear submarine deployment to Cuba back in June.
So, expanding influence close to the U.S.
It seems to be about low-cost ways for these powers to expand their influence and challenge U.S. partnerships right in its own hemisphere.
Phew. Okay. That is a comprehensive and, frankly, sobering overview of a truly complex and interconnected threat environment.
So given this rapidly evolving landscape, what does this all mean for defense budgets globally?
Well, the financial implications are, as you might expect, pretty significant. Global defense spending surged, as the report says, by 8.1% in 2024.
Surged?
Reaching an unprecedented $2.3 trillion globally.
2.3 trillion. Yeah, and this isn't just random spending increases. It's a direct, measurable response to the security crises we've just been discussing.
Right.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the volatility in the Middle East, the Hamas attacks, Israel's operations, and those rising tensions in Asia over China, Taiwan, the South China Sea. It's all connected.
And this marks a real shift.
This surge truly marks a new paradigm, I think. We're definitively moving away from that counterinsurgency, counterterrorism focus of the past 2 decades.
Towards what?
Procurement priorities are shifting back towards core capabilities needed for large-scale, state-on-state conflict. Things like artillery, ammunition, main battle tanks, armored vehicles, air defense missiles, drones, of course, and survivability upgrades against advanced threats and electronic warfare.
Preparing for a different kind of fight.
Exactly. Being ready for conventional conflict between major powers. And the spending is concentrated. The top 20 defense spenders account for a massive 82.4% of global outlays. That's nearly $1.9 trillion just among those top 20.
Any country standing out?
Poland, the Netherlands, and Israel are among those with the fastest growing budgets, which makes sense given their direct exposure to some of these threats.
Kind of regionally.
Regionally, North America, obviously led by the U.S., remains the largest spender. Big investments in shipbuilding, missile defense, next-gen systems. Asia accounts for about 22%, driven primarily by China, and Europe's share is now 17%, and it's rising due to these rearmament efforts.
Okay, so we're seeing this massive injection of cash into defense aimed at rebuilding conventional capabilities, but actually building all this new defense hardware, getting it fielded, that requires a robust supply chain, right? And that's not as simple as just writing a check, is it?
You're absolutely right. It's not simple at all. Supply chain resilience isn't just, nice to have. It's absolutely critical, especially in defense where national security is literally at stake.
And it's vulnerable.
The defense supply chain faces constant disruptions from all the factors we've talked about. Geopolitical conflicts, rapid tech advancements, parts becoming obsolete, shortages.
Cyber threats.
Huge ones. Cybersecurity threats, global economic shifts, extreme weather events, even pandemics, as we saw. Any one of these can halt production or delay vital equipment getting where it needs to go.
So what are the biggest risks?
Well, Celestica, they're a major player in this space, identifies 5 prevalent risks that make this so challenging. First, just geopolitical and global economic policies. They create immense uncertainty affecting trade, resources, manufacturing, shipping, everything.
Makes sense.
Second, parts obsolescence and shortages. This is a huge headache, particularly for legacy defense systems that rely on older components that maybe aren't made anymore.
Great.
This leads to production halts, missed deadlines, and it's worse because the highly regulated defense sector can just easily swap in readily available commercial parts when something reaches its end of life.
Okay.
Third, cybersecurity threats. Everything from data breaches to ransomware, these can disrupt entire operations. So robust compliance with standards like NIST and DFARS becomes absolutely imperative for suppliers. Fourth, those very stringent regulatory compliance requirements, while totally necessary for safety and security, can actually limit flexibility. They make it harder to react quickly when a component suddenly becomes unavailable.
A double-edged sword there.
Kind of. And fifth, just the relentless pressure to keep pace with rapid product transformation. Incorporating cutting-edge tech like AI, advanced encryption, jamming capabilities, this often demands qualifying non-traditional, maybe less secure supply chains.
So it's not just about spending the money. It's about spending it smartly, with a lot of foresight about these risks.
Yeah.
How are defense manufacturers actually tackling this? How do you build resilience into such a vulnerable system?
Well, to build resilience, defense OEMs, the big manufacturers, are focusing on several key areas. First, building a truly global and diverse supply base. You need flexibility, scalability.
Not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. Which means ensuring component-level sourcing diversification. Avoiding those catastrophic disruptions that happen when you rely on a single source for a critical part.
Proactive planning.
Yes, proactive risk assessment and mitigation, starting right from the design phase of a product. Thinking about the supply chain from day one. Then there's the need for robust visibility and traceability systems.
Seeing the whole chain.
Right. Comprehensive global inventory management, leveraging predictive analytics using AI and machine learning to forecast demand, potential shortages, even the impacts of geopolitical events.
Wow.
And finally, fostering really close collaboration with suppliers. That's essential for swift decision-making and agile responses when a crisis inevitably hits.
And you mentioned Celestica has an approach.
Yeah, they champion what they call design for supply chain, or DFSC. The idea is integrating supply chain considerations really early in the product design process itself.
Building it in from the start.
Precisely. Enhancing effectiveness and readiness by making resilience a foundational element right from the beginning, not an afterthought.
Okay, let's try and bring all these threads together now. We've explored the escalating threats, the massive surge in global defense spending, and this critical underlying challenge of building a resilient supply chain. This fundamental shift, away from the post-Cold War focus on counterterrorism towards full-on great power competition. It has profound implications for how the U.S. defends itself and its interests.
It really does, and it raises that important question. How does the U.S. military adapt to these expanded, technologically advanced, globally interconnected threats?
Right.
Well, one thing is a renewed emphasis on grand strategy thinking globally, regionally. And there's a significant debate happening right now over whether to adopt an Asia-first strategy, focusing primarily on China, or a more balanced resource allocation between China and Russia.
Can the U.S. handle both?
That's the crux. Okay. It's worth noting that the U.S. military, as it stands, is currently assessed as not sized to handle 2 simultaneous major conflicts. The structure is more to fight one major conflict and keep a second adversary in check.
So that size constraint drives a lot of decisions.
It drives many of the strategic decisions we're seeing, yes. And this new reality is also directly driving organizational changes within the Department of Defense.
Like Space Force.
Exactly. The creation of the U.S. Space Force, the elevation of U.S. Cyber Command to a unified combatant command. And just back on February 12, 2024, the Department of the Air Force announced major reorganizations within the Air Force and Space Force themselves, specifically to optimize for great power competition.
And nuclear weapons.
There's also a renewed, very urgent emphasis on nuclear weapons, deterrence, and arms control. The U.S. is in the early stages of a huge multi-year plan to modernize its strategic nuclear deterrent forces.
How does that involve?
New ballistic missile submarines, a next-generation long-range bomber, the B-21, and a next-generation ICBM. This modernization is happening in direct response to China's rapid nuclear expansion, remember? Possibly 1,000 warheads by 2030, and also Russia's concerning nuclear rhetoric.
So the U.S. military is adjusting its internal structure, its most powerful deterrence. What about its global footprint? How it positions forces around the world?
Yeah, the Global Posture Review has solidified the Indo-Pacific as the priority theater. That's driving increased correlation with allies like Australia and Japan, enhancing infrastructure in places like Guam and Australia, and more rotational aircraft deployments.
And Europe.
In Europe, the focus is squarely on strengthening the combat deterrent against Russia. That includes lifting previous troop caps in Germany and permanently basing a new type of unit called a multi-domain task force there.
And elsewhere.
The Middle East posture is being reevaluated for what an enduring presence looks like. Africa focuses on supporting interagency reviews, and Central and South America continue supporting efforts against transnational challenges and building partnerships.
Okay, what about actual capabilities, especially in the Indo-Pacific?
Right, the Indo-Pacific strategy really emphasizes strengthening capabilities specifically for countering China. This is often funded through something called the Pacific Deterrence Initiative, or PDI.
And what does that look like on the ground, or
Sure.
sea and air?
It involves shifting towards more distributed force architectures, spreading forces out so they're harder to target, using new operational concepts like multi-domain operations, or MDO, integrating operations across land, sea, air, space, cyber seamlessly, or agile combat employment, ACE, which is about making air forces less predictable, more survivable by dispersing them to smaller, more austere locations.
So less reliance on big bases.
Essentially. It all emphasizes distributed, networked, unmanned, and integrated operations. The goal is more longer-ranged aircraft and missiles, hardening bases that remain, exploiting U.S. advantages like undersea warfare,
Right.
and making command and control systems, C4ISR, and logistics much more resilient against attack.
And in Europe, similar strengthening.
Yes, through the European Deterrence Initiative, or EDI. Focus there is on strengthening U.S. and NATO capabilities against Russia, including an increased presence in frontline states like Poland.
It really sounds like a fundamental reorientation towards preparing for that high-end conventional warfare
Right.
rather than the counterinsurgency stuff of the last 20 years.
Exactly. There's a clear, renewed emphasis on preparing for large-scale, high-intensity conflict. And this is what's driving the big acquisition programs.
Buying new gear.
Buying advanced aircraft like the F-35 fighter and the B-21 bomber, new warships like the Virginia-class submarines and the latest DDG-51 destroyers, investing heavily in ballistic missile defense, longer-range weapons, directed energy weapons.
Lasers and microwaves.
Right. And integrated C4ISR to tie it all together. But a critical concern for the DoD is the perception that U.S. superiority in conventional weapon technologies is narrowing.
So trying to regain the edge.
Yes, trying to regain and maintain it. They're significantly increasing R&D investment in key areas: AI, autonomous weapons, hypersonics, directed energy, biotechnology, quantum technology, while also using export controls to try and prevent adversaries from acquiring similar capabilities.
And getting these new technologies fielded faster. Is it happening?
Well, there's definitely a new urgency around innovation and speed. Trying to develop and deploy weapon systems much faster, overcome those traditionally slow, linear development cycles that take forever.
Right.
That design for supply chain approach we discussed is key here, building resilience in from the start. But it's a huge challenge. Major defense acquisition programs still average over 10 years just to deliver initial capability.
Over a decade.
Yeah. So there's a push to adjust acquisition policy, prioritize innovation and speed, maybe even accept more risk and tolerate more failure during development to accelerate things.
What about the industrial base? Can it keep up?
That's another major focus. increased emphasis on U.S. mobilization capabilities for potentially long, drawn-out conflicts. There are real concerns about industrial capacity limits, especially for producing key munitions like precision-guided missiles quickly enough, so needing quicker ways to ramp up production capacity.
And securing the supply chain itself.
Absolutely critical. Heightened focus on supply chain security, understanding, and minimizing reliance on Chinese or Russian components, materials, even software in U.S. defense equipment.
And finally, those gray zone tactics.
Yes, countering Russia's hybrid warfare and information ops, and China's salami slicing or gray zone tactics, especially in the South and East China, sees those actions that fall just below the threshold of armed conflict but incrementally seize advantages. That's a huge focus, too.
Yeah.
So if we try and connect all these threads, step back and look at the bigger picture, you can really see how these seemingly disparate elements, advanced tech, supply chains, nuclear strategy, regional postures, budgets, they're all deeply intertwined.
It all fits together.
It does. The landscape is shifting dramatically, and it demands really comprehensive, really agile responses from the U.S. and its allies.
Indeed. So what does all this mean for you listening right now? Given this incredibly rapid pace of technological change and the deepening cooperation we're seeing among adversaries, what aspect of defense innovation or maybe international collaboration do you think will be the single most critical factor shaping global security in the next, say, 5 years?
That's a great question.
That's definitely something worth pondering. Thanks for joining us for the deep dive.